Welcome to AM Best Audio.
Welcome to AM Best Audio. I am William Borden. The Microinsurance Network's Executive Director, Matthew Genazzini, and network member, Rishi Raithatha, are joining the podcast today, where we will discuss the growing market for microinsurance, where small payments provide financial security for people in low-income nations around the world, and how technology makes that possible. Thank you for joining us today.
What's fueling the growth of microinsurance?
So it's interesting that you should ask this question because it is a sector that is growing, and we've seen it grow over a number of recent years. That said, there is still an enormous amount of the untapped market. But if we want to look at the reasons for the growth, I think we can look at two sides. So if we look at the demand side first, there's a huge underserved population out there that has no access to insurance services. And according to the recent landscape of microinsurance, which was published by the Microinsurance Network, 90% of the targeted population are uninsured. And we've estimated this to be in the region of about 3 billion people. So you can imagine, there's this huge untapped market out there. So there is enormous potential there. Then staying to the demand side, we believe there's a rising awareness of financial inclusion efforts. There's an awareness of financial risks that need to be covered, especially when it comes to health risks, natural disasters, and crop insurance. These are becoming low-income populations are becoming more aware of these risks, and they're wanting to find different solutions to manage those risks. So that's on the demand side. And then if we look at the supply side, there's a number of aspects that you need to look at when you're looking at the growth of microinsurance. The first is everything related to products and the kind of product diversification. We're seeing different kinds of products being offered on the market. We're seeing products that are much more adapted to the needs of the population, and we're seeing many more products being launched each year as we go along. So in that terms, we're seeing many more products on the market to service those different needs of the population. Then alongside that, what we're also seeing is in terms of the distribution. So how are these products distributed? How are they access to these populations? Well, from the data that we have, the financial institutions, microfinance institutions, the traditional channels, including agents and brokers, they continue to dominate, but we are seeing an increase in terms of mobile network operators coming into play, which I'm sure we're going to talk about with Rishi afterwards, and other distribution channels, fintechs, insurtechs coming into play. In Africa alone, from the data that we had, 2.5 million people were accessed insurance services through mobile network operators, and that was in 2023. So that number will have increased since then. Two other things that I want to mention about the growth is obviously there's technology and mobile penetration, which again Rishi knows much more about, but we'll talk about that probably in a little bit. But obviously technology and mobile penetration has enabled people to access these services much more easily and bring down the costs. And the last thing that I want to mention is in terms of the regulation. So in many of these countries, regulators are seeing the benefits of having a specific microinsurance regulation in place. And we see a real correlation between those countries that have a microinsurance regulation in place and the insurance penetration. So from the top 10 countries that we looked at with the highest insurance penetration, 9 of those had some sort of microinsurance regulation in place. So there's a real correlation there. So that's kind of very, very briefly a rundown of why I think what's fueling the growth of microinsurance. And Rishi, if you want to add anything, don't hesitate to
I think you captured that really well. There's not much more I would add there, but I'm more than happy to talk up the role that technology plays in pushing microinsurance, because you think about some of the things that are possible now, if we go back to parametric insurance, that wouldn't have made sense to continue as a long-term business. You can't keep going to weather stations and taking data of books that have been written down by pen and paper and then trying to do the kind of actuarial analysis you need to. So very, very holistically, you could say that technology has driven a lot of things in the space, particularly the development of new products and new services. And, I remember even 5 or 6 years ago when I was still relatively new in the space and looking at parametric insurance. And to me, it was probably one of the best things I'd come across since sliced bread. But there was a lot of skepticism about it because a satellite will tell you whether there's cloud over an area, but it will not tell you whether the cloud is actually raining or emitting water in this particular case. Things have changed a lot. There's a lot more accurate data. There are better ways of making sure that we can capture what we would consider to be the ground truth. So I'd say my argument there, well, my augmentation there to what Matt has very well put is that technology has driven quite a lot in this space.
Now, I guess there's a tremendous, given this opportunity, you're seeing a lot of big traditional carriers starting to enter the field, whether it's through various ventures like Blue Marble, or you're essentially seeing companies that started up less than 15 years ago that have all of a sudden reached a scale of millions of users of microinsurance. So where's the opportunity here for these carriers?
I think there's a number of kind of opportunities for them. Obviously, there's, what I mentioned before, this huge untapped market for them. They can diversify their portfolio enormously by coming into this sector, and kind of enable them to test out new products. When we talk about microinsurance, very often it's described as insurance back to basics, because you really need to strip it back to really what it's fundamentally there for. And so using that kind of methodology enables them to kind of test these new products on the market. Then there's everything related to the competitive advantage that they have. They're large brands with huge scale. They have a brand, they have a distribution model already in place. So these all play into factors that can decrease their costs and enable them to kind of reach that scale that is so important within this sector. The third point is related to the partnerships that they can put in place. With the branding that they have, the fact that they're well known, they can create partnerships with organisations. It's much more easy for them to kind of convince other partners or other distribution partners or other reinsurers to come into this space and to kind of help them develop their services. And then from another opportunity, not only is there an untapped market, but these are potential clients for other products as well down the line when they come out of poverty and they kind of can start accessing their normal insurance products.
Or as markets mature and people start to actually make more money, and all of a sudden you seem to have this population that is relatively unbanked. All of a sudden they might need additional financial services as they start to save and generate more income.
Exactly. That's exactly kind of one of the reasons, one of the arguments that we do use when we're trying to convince these large players to come into this sector is that there is an enormous potential to have clients coming further down the line.
Well, and also, you're collecting premiums that could be as low as 20 cents a month. An MBA at a trading desk probably creates more risk for a financial institution than a poor farmer that just wants to cover their crops against floods and drought.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, Rishi, this is more directed to you. How important are mobile apps in the realm of setting up microinsurance platforms?
It's a good question. Mobile has been involved in microinsurance for quite some time. I think the advent of mobile money, which started in the Philippines and then, of course, became extremely popular in Africa and is also used widely in Asia, a little bit in Latin America. I think around that sort of time, there were also experiments to determine how to use mobile, especially because it was growing within one facet of financial services. Where we see it now is that with smartphone penetration growing and even maturing in certain parts of the world, you do have across several markets, individuals and businesses being able to access microinsurance, even traditional insurance via apps. And this is particularly rife in Asia, which has high smartphone, not just penetration, but use as well, the use of database apps. Now, what you see in parts of Asia is that these products are often offered by fintechs, or even in some cases directly by insurers or brokers. So good examples of fintechs who do offer this in Asia: eSewa in Nepal, GCash in the Philippines, and Singtel in Singapore. What they've all done is they're working together with traditional insurers, and they've co-branded products which are relevant for their customers. So you can buy typhoon insurance in the Philippines. Singtel allows you to buy a policy that gives you life insurance if you save regularly. eSewa has really bespoke policies for religious events in Nepal that attract a lot of people. And so regular things, but also things that are, I guess, inherent or specific to those markets. And these apps also serve as platforms. So you can buy the insurance that they've co-branded, but you can also use fintechs such as PhonePe in India and M-Pesa in Kenya to access services that others provide, much the same way that you would find with the super apps in China. The thing about apps, as you know, as we all know, is that they offer a much better experience than USSD, which is what people would have been using in the early years of mobile money, and that just means that there's a richer content, there's a richer experience, and with adoption growing, there's an opportunity for anyone providing insurance to offer more sophisticated and relevant services via these apps.
Customize your data experience. BestLink now offers an interactive company dashboard that provides company-level intelligence in a fast, user-friendly interface featuring interactive tables, charts, and Sparkline performance histories. Customize the dashboard tiles to prioritize the insurer ratings, data, and analytics that best support your workflow. AM Best. Our insight, your advantage.
Now, how are the apps configured to work in environments where the wireless networks themselves might be suboptimal, where 5G is not really the standard in some markets? You might be working with something that's a little bit more 3G or maybe even earlier. How do the apps kind of navigate that technological obstacle?
It's a question I ask myself every day because I live in the UK and even 5G isn't a given there. We have plenty of black spots. It's an interesting question because a lot of people in the industry who are trying to distribute products through apps worry about this. In general, you find that if you are developing a smartphone app as your way of distributing your products, services, or someone else's products or services, then you have to have a 4G connection. You do have 3G specific apps, but we have fewer examples of those. And the other thing to bear in mind, something that we know, is that apps that require data typically struggle to perform well when the connection is weak. Now, a really good example is in-flight Wi-Fi. We've all flown on airlines that promise to give you free Wi-Fi, and it works fine if you're doing basic things like sending WhatsApp messages or emails that don't contain attachments or photos. But for anything that is rich content, or you're attaching things, you need a significantly better connection. You're only going to get that on airlines with Starlink. So it's a similar sort of principle with the network connection. That if you're designing apps, you're expecting a certain segment to be using that, one that has access to data or Wi-Fi or so. And as a result, what you find that this is still an issue across certain parts of Africa where network infrastructure can be quite patchy. And so to overcome this, some insurers and fintechs, I should add, still rely on USSD, which is in effect 2G technology. Now, maintaining a legacy system is costly, but unfortunately, or maybe it's not unfortunate, it's still a necessary expense to target unserved or underserved customers. And so you have this system where you need to create two different types of channel access routes for the same product. You are going to find differences in the product. That much I think is fair in many cases, because there's certain things you can only buy on an app. But there's also an interesting phenomenon where you have a habit to cater to. You can have smartphone penetration grow in certain East African markets or other markets in Africa. But that doesn't mean that people are necessarily going to be using all the apps available to them. You still have some users who may be accustomed to buying mobile-based financial products through USSD, and they'll continue to do that via smartphones. So at some point, you need to wean people off. But generally, you find a duality in certain markets, and that's mostly in Africa.
Yeah, and just to add, I mean, this is why it's so important to understand the clients that you're serving and understand the different behaviors that they have when it comes to technology, and also, the type of networks that they have access to, and designing the products, designing the apps around those behaviors and networks, and it will enable you to kind of service those clients much, much better.
I mean, it's absolutely correct, because when I talked to a couple of partners in Asia, we were talking about the fact that in markets like the Philippines or Thailand or Cambodia, where smartphone penetration is high, data is cheap, the moment someone has a smartphone, that's it. They're going through the richer experience. That's not the same case in Tanzania or Ghana or Togo or some of the countries we talk about, Zambia or Madagascar. It doesn't necessarily mean that. Yes, they have a smartphone. Do they have access to the cheap data or reliable data, let alone affordability? It may not always be the case. And even if they do, there's still a habit to overcome that they're used to pressing a 3-digit shortcode to access these services.
Yeah.
And that was news to my Asian friends who couldn't quite understand that, if X is 1, then Y is 2, but it actually didn't work like that in this particular case.
And I guess with all these players in the marketplace, to what degree do you see this sort of engagement with their customer? How do you strengthen those connections with your customers, given the tech platforms that you have?
Well, when we think about the potential for mobile, it's quite straightforward, and I think it's the same argument that the mobile industry keeps making. Most people own at least one mobile phone. Some people have two or more. And from a distribution point of view, when you think about the fact that people have this device in their hand or their pocket, it offers a large user base that many other channels cannot. Maybe some, but few others can. And so as a result, you have a situation where you've got these users with this technological gadget with them that probably have a basic level of digital literacy. They might have some financial literacy. That is the assumption you make. And that means that several people will be comfortable using a mobile to try and understand what is insurance or what products are available. And from a payments aspect, mobile is a leader in many markets. Payments in China. I was having dinner with a friend yesterday who's a tour guide, and he takes people to China, and he said, "Yeah, I've got yuan, but no one takes cash anymore. It's all WeChat Pay or Alipay." Similar thing in India as well, with UPI growing, and it's the same in Africa, where mobile money is just very normal for payments in so many countries. So payments are by default being done over mobile. And by the way, that's the same for us. We're all using Google Pay or Apple Pay, which is extremely convenient to do. And then so it's not just about microinsurance having gone towards mobile, but you have other industries who are seeing the benefit of using mobiles as a means to develop new business or to create new opportunities. Things that wouldn't have existed years ago now do so, because there is this particular platform to reach people or to build services on top of. And at the end of the day, it does come down to convenience. You don't need to ring anybody. You don't need to sit in front of a computer. You can do all these things and access information, read key terms, pay premiums, and receive claims all through mobile. Just offers a lot of opportunity there.
And where would you say the microinsurance sector is growing the fastest?
Yeah, I can take that. I mean, if we're looking at from a regional perspective, you would have to look at Asia as the kind of continent that's been growing the fastest, and this is mainly due to the huge populations that are there, the rapid digital adoption, and also a lot of the kind of public policies and regulations that are being putting into place. So you have a lot of public-private partnerships that are kind of really increasing penetration and enabling for insurance companies to offer products at a more reasonable price through subsidies. Then, if you come to Latin America, it's expanding quite quickly. We were in Quito, in Ecuador, last year for the International Conference on Inclusive Insurance. And there, we are seeing governments coming into play. We are seeing new regulations coming into play, government subsidies, digital outreach and mobile solutions, helping to boost a lot of the products, which are mainly in that region, life and accident coverage. And then coming to Africa, Rishi mentioned mobile money platforms like M-Pesa has really kind of facilitated insurance uptake among rural and underserved populations. And particularly for agriculture and health coverages. So that's kind of where what I would say about what regions are showing the quickest growth.
And are there specific lines that are growing quicker than other lines? Like, is agricultural growing faster than the broader market overall, or is it life and health?
So if you look at the products that are being covered by, so in the study that we did, the landscape of microinsurance, 2024, we identified around 340 million people were covered by inclusive insurance or microinsurance. And 80% of those were covered with a product that was either life or accident. So that still remains the product that is the most expanded. It's the easiest product that's to put out there. A lot of those products are linked to credits as well, so it really kind of facilitates that kind of selling by bundling it with another financial service. What we want to see in the future is those other products that start becoming more prominent. Like agriculture insurance and also, health insurance. Health insurance is probably one of the most in-demand products out there, but it's one of the ones that is very complicated to make sustainable. But there are opportunities out there to change that.
Thank you for taking the time for the interview. And once again, this is William Borden for AM Best Audio. Thank you to Matthew Genazzini and Rishi Raithatha from the Microinsurance Network.
Looking to get the full attention of the insurance industry? We have the platforms that will do just that. Whether it be AM Best TV, AM Best Audio, Best Review Magazine, or Best Day. Find out more by calling AM Best Advertising Sales at 908-439-2200, extension 5399, and have a great day.